Welcome to another episode. We are going to talk about solar, renewable energy storage. We are going to talk about what's new in the industry, where the industry is heading with the new changes that I'm sure you are aware of or you've heard recently. And I brought here Brendan, whom I had a pleasure of connecting with last year. I would love to see what's new, what's happening in beautiful state of Texas, and how are you preparing for all the changes. Brandon, if you could introduce yourself and the company you represent, we'll start with that.
I'm Brandon Elliott, represent Next Generation Solar. We were founded in 2019. We are an EPC. We do have an inside sales team, but we focus mainly on our dealers and our EPC program. I've been in the solar industry for about 12 years now. I was recruited over from Reliant. I used to run a canvas team for Reliant where we would just go neighborhood to neighborhood, switching people over, getting them a cheaper rate on their electricity. I had a friend that was in the solar industry and had been talking to me for at least a year. Like, come try it out. You guys could do well here. And I just really wasn't trying to hear it. I was making decent money there. Didn't know anything about solar. Finally, he talked me into it and I haven't looked back. Within a year, I was selling solar and I was a solar sales manager, a regional sales manager. And from then I've kind of made it my niche to build markets for other companies coming to the Texas market. So I built the Texas market for Sunrun and another company called Elevation when they branched out, because as you know, Texas has been identified by most all solar companies around the country as the hot spot, the next hot state
Yeah.
as far as solar sales. Like I said, I founded Next Generation in 2019 simply because I kept getting calls from my customers and I just kept getting the impression that they weren't being taken care of, right?
Mm.
The customer experience was missing, right? They were, people were making pretty good money and that's all they seemed to be worried about. But I could tell that that was going to be a problem in our industry if it wasn't rectified. So during COVID, we launched Next Generation Solar. Had some growing pains in the first year or two, trying to learn supply chains and good distributors to deal with, and dealing with the solar lenders in the first person instead of third person basis. So yeah, we had our growing pains, but it's going well. And of course, we're coming to another point in time where there's a lot of changes going on with the big, beautiful bill and whatnot. But in the solar industry, you always have to be ready to pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that you mentioned is building markets in previously. Can you elaborate on that term? It's interesting to hear how you are able to build markets. Obviously, Texas is a beast on itself, almost like completely different than any other states in the United States when it comes to energy regulation. But what do you mean by building markets? I'll be curious to hear.
Let's take Sunrun for instance. They are a West Coast company, and once they identified Texas as the next state that they wanted to actively target and get some business from, they have to turn to someone who knows the market. Right? It
Mm.
doesn't do any good for them to bring one of their California managers out to this market and think that they'll have the same success because it's apples and oranges. Texas is completely different from, let's say, California, because this is a grid tied state. Whereas there, the solar system aren't tied to the grid. They can be off grid. So for someone who doesn't understand this market, it'll be almost an impossible task for them to launch and build and keep scaling the market the way they would like to, right? They have to have someone who has knowledge about the local electricity providers, the local regulations regarding solar, how it's legislated here in the state, things of that nature, interconnection processes. All these processes are different from state to state.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense now. We actually, the company I was with when I first started in the solar space, we tried to open up an office in Texas, and it was challenging. We gave up on that journey, and I didn't even make it out there to Texas to explore this beautiful state, because before I was due to visit their office, we are pretty much part of our way. So I can now I know what you mean by that. So they definitely want to have someone who understands the ins and outs of the industry there and base there.
And just like you said, even selling in California or Utah or Arizona versus selling in Texas, it's a lot harder sale down here.
Mm.
That's why a lot of sales reps that come here from other markets a lot of them don't succeed. So yeah, I prefer to have people from here so that they don't know how easy a sale it is in other states. Right. And that's been serving me well.
Yes. So you mentioned something really interesting. You wanted to control the whole process, the entire process, so you can influence it in a positive way, and make sure a customer is getting the experience they deserve, right? Homeowners, I'm pretty sure you're doing some smaller or bigger commercial projects here and there as well. So what was in the very beginning when you first started, outside of the world collapsing and everyone going crazy during that time, what was a positive and what was maybe a negative experience or surprise in those first maybe 12 months or 24 months?
The positive was not having someone standing over me with
Mm.
goals that we needed to reach, right? The negatives, there were plenty of them because I'm from the sales side of things, not the operations side of things, right? And us sales guys, we think we're so smart. We think we know everything. Operations, I can figure that out. That's nothing. Well, it was a far cry from nothing, right? But it was eye-opening. I got to understand processes and how processes needed to be streamlined in order to avoid a lot of delays that I had experienced as a sales rep in other companies. When my first couple of years of selling solar, I thought it was customary for an install to take 60 days, 90 days. When really it's not. When they're taking that long, it's because someone has dropped the ball in between one of the processes and it hasn't been moved to the next process. Right. A solar installation, honestly, should not take longer than 30 days. And a lot of companies are doing it quicker than that. And of course, where you are matters a little bit. Some cities take a little longer to get the permit. But that being said, 60, 90 days is ridiculous for a residential solar install. And that means something is going wrong with your operational process. So being able to finally be on the operation side and see how these processes work, I was able to understand some of the mistakes that the other companies I worked for were making. Simple mistakes, but simple mistakes that were causing jobs to last a month and a half, 2 months longer than what they were supposed to be to get installed.
And I can imagine also not letting the customer know that it's going to take however long it's going to take, and just ghosting them until they call you and try to find out what's the status of their installation. I've seen those
It's
stories
funny
as
how you phrase that because that's exactly how it goes. You don't have an answer for them, right? So you kind of avoid them thinking that someone in your organization is going to give you an answer in a timely fashion. And then here you are 2, 3 weeks later, you still don't have an answer for the same question. And time kills all deals, right?
well.
Not only does it kill all deals, it definitely kills referrals, right?
Absolutely.
If you're
Especially that an installation itself takes maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days if it's a bigger, but in most cases I can imagine a regular size can get done in 24 hours or in one day.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1 days when you get a good crew and they know they have all the materials, then they can knock out. Unless there's some acts of gods and what have you, rain, whatever, then obviously there's some delays. But customer might be wondering, like, why did it take me 90 days if the
if
installation
the
itself?
installation only took 2 days. Do you know
Yeah.
how many times I've been asked that question? And you don't really have a good answer that doesn't sound like an excuse, right?
Mm.
So it's a tough position to be in. I learned really quickly that the customer experience is everything in this business. You need referrals. To be a sustainable solar company, you should be getting at least 30% of your business from referrals. Otherwise, your overhead is driving up because now you're replacing that 30% elsewhere with buying leads or however you're trying to do this, outsourcing it through a call center. The name of this game, especially right now in this economy and with the changes that we're going through, is keeping your overhead down.
Lean and mean, yes, keeping the company
Yes.
lean. It's important, and that's what I hear more often. Not only in that industry, but in any other industry that is hurting, there's going through some tougher times. Unless, I guess, based on recent news, unless you're in crypto, you probably
Right.
have to stay lean and figure out.
Because everybody else is dealing with tariffs,
Yes,
right?
tech and all kinds.
Everybody else, every other company, except the companies who are lucky to be manufacturing all of their equipment here in the US, which is a small percentage, right? The rest of us are dealing with tariffs, you know.
And fun fact, speaking of some excuses, I heard it's not an excuse, but it's a good story to tell your customers. I guess when you're in a situation, there's 18,000 authority having jurisdictions in the United States. So all of them authority having jurisdictions. So those are
Wow.
the folks that try to understand your plans that you submit to the city and make a decision whether or not it should be stamped over the counter or they need a week or two or
Of these different agencies.
yeah. So every almost, yeah, it's 18,000. I was shocked too to hear that. 18,000 authority having jurisdictions that dictate. Everyone is different, and I've been only working when I was doing that in my regions here. As far as I would go, maybe Nevada and Arizona, but that's just one part of the industry. Big part, obviously, because we have abundant amounts of sun. But yeah, there's so many different authority having jurisdiction that all work in different manners. So if you're that's why I'm a big fan of what the approach you took, and the reason why Sunrun, I believe it was, reach out to you in the beginning, because they should it should be regional. You shouldn't be getting into the industry and trying to go after so many different markets and so many different space, so many different locations, because that will kill you. I mean, it is what it is. It's impossible to do unless you have, I don't know, investors, backed companies, and VCs and what have you to hire them.
That's how a lot of companies used to operate, right?
Yeah.
They would get a manager who's done well, let's say in this San Francisco market, right? And they're like, well, now we want to open a market here in Florida. So they'll move him out there, expecting him to have the same success in a foreign territory that he had in his home territory. And
Yeah.
that's just not realistic, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy, and you have to. And I know, I've seen so many companies, 7 8 figure companies, and we've seen a $1 billion company recently close their doors, and manufacturers, publicly traded companies. So it's been a wild west for some, and I believe obviously there's regulations. That's a big part. That's another story, and why they don't cooperate with companies like yours, and listen to companies like yours to actually who have firsthand experience from the homeowners side and from the business perspective. If we want to drive this solar and renewable energy, clean energy revolution, let's call it, forward, then we have to cooperate. And that's one part, the government, the regulations, but also mismanagement, like you said, just having wrong people in the wrong seat. Solar, my first impression was all about the money, just so much. You see those big contracts and you see those big numbers, and they just, in some people's mind, they just reactivate those instincts that are
Yeah.
not good. You can't control them sometimes, and you just want more and more and more, and that's going to change. And yeah, so that's a big thing of part of the industry.
That thing you said about the large $1 billion company that just closed, that's what's happening right now. The business model of the huge Sunrun type company, Sunrun, if you look at their financials, Sunrun hasn't turned a profit in like 7 or 8 years.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I can tell you why. When I was there and I saw how they were running it and how they were wasting funds and how high their overhead was, I knew they were in trouble. Now, what's I'm just going to use Sunrun as an example. They would have so much overhead, right? Because what they will do is, let's just take the Dallas market here in Sunrun. They may have about 10 to 12 different install crews, right? They're paying all these guys hourly, which is fine, but the supervisor of each crew is salary. So you've got 12 supervisors making 60 grand a year salary before their overrides. That's great in the spring and the summer when it's your busy time, right? And you're putting up sales. But what about November through February, right? You can't have the same amount of overhead going out during your lean time when you're not getting any sales that you do during your peak time. You know what I mean? When you're getting all the sales, it's a recipe for disaster, right? That's why Sunrun's business model for so long was they used to pitch the lease. They would tell in training, even though they offered loans and leases, they would let you know they preferred the lease, and they would compensate their reps better for selling a lease versus a loan, right?
Wow.
Because them being able to keep the tax credit meant a lot. Now with the tax credit going away, that's going to hurt Sunrun tremendously. That's a big part of their business model, is getting the tax credit back and getting these people on a lease or a PPA. Right
Yeah.
now, that's gone for them. That option is gone for them. And even with that business model, they've still been losing money over the last 7 or 8 years. So, and then there was ADT. I'm sure you're familiar with ADT. They had ADT Solar had bought out SunPro, which was a Louisiana solar company. Have you heard of SunPro?
I've
They
heard about
merged.
Sungrow, but yeah, I didn't know about the
They
80.
merged with ADT about 2 years ago, and within a year, they had to shut it down because ADT didn't realize they were taking on all of SunPro's lawsuits, all of their baggage, all of their, you know what I mean?
That's
And
interesting. They didn't do their due diligence, or they just.
I guess not, or maybe
Oh,
SunPro. was kind of dishonest with their numbers, maybe. Because sometimes that happens when you have a merger or a buyout, when you're hiding certain things from the buyer. But yeah, that model of that huge solar company with all these people on salary, it's you can't survive like that. That's why we transitioned, scaled down our inside sales, and focused mainly on the EPC program with the dealers who are essentially operating their own sales organization under our umbrella. But we have nobody under salary. If they want to pay someone salary, that's their business, right? And the way we were able to get around the huge overhead with our installers is that I do not pay my install supervisors any salary. I do not pay my installers hourly. The whole crew gets paid on a job basis, on a per kilowatt basis, right? And it's a very fair rate. But what that alleviates is that pressure that we always feel from November to February with all this money going out. Now with less than half of the normal money coming in, it puts you in that squeeze. And that's why these companies are failing and shutting their doors. Too much overhead.
Yeah,
And
that makes
the lenders aren't helping either.
At the moment we tried the same approach, our installation time went from 2.5 days to under a day for half
Right.
the installation
You know
time.
what I mean? Because they were milking the clock.
Sure.
Exactly. And we saw that too. Like all of a sudden installs went from 3 to 4 days to one day.
Yeah.
You know?
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's
So yeah,
very
the companies that want to keep that old business model, they're not going to survive.
Yeah, no, we have to adopt. Like we spoke about it prior to hitting that record button. That it's a survival of the fittest time, and then you have to be smart about it. Well, have you ever thought about selling directly to consumer? That D2C, so-called D2C model, direct to consumer, becomes. I hear more and more about that. It's becoming also popular in Europe, which I feel like Europe and US. It's either happening 6 or 9 months earlier in Europe, and then we have the same similar wave in the United States, or vice versa, which starts in the United States, translates over to Europe 9 months later. Have you ever thought about that model or explored that model as
Well, when
well?
you say direct to consumer, exactly what do you mean?
So essentially, you would have no almost what maybe this would be ring a bell. What Tesla did to the car sales, they eliminated the dealership salespeople. They essentially can go online, you can look up, build your car the way you want. You don't have to speak to a manager and then to another manager. Who, all of those guys have to get their commissions, and they essentially cut that. You buy online, and if you need to go to the dealership, obviously that's a different story. Then maybe they do that, but I feel like they start shutting down if they already not did all shut down all of their dealerships. So essentially, you buy directly from Tesla. In your case, homeowners would buy directly from you without even talking to a salesperson. You
Let
can.
me ask you this. So is what you're envisioning kind of like I would have like a calculator on that site to where they could put in what their average kilowatt usage is or what their average bill is, and our app will let them know what size system they would need, and they
That's
would
one.
just kind of build it like that?
That's one thing. I also seen it going as far as you are showing the price on you give them three options, three system options, for example.
Uh-huh.
So a smaller house, let's say up to 2,000 square feet. I'm making up the numbers right now. 5 kilowatt system, maybe 8 kilowatt system, and 12 kilowatt system if you have larger home. And you show them obviously energy storage if that's applicable. And most markets now go with energy storage. So you have energy storage, you have the kilowatt system, you have three options, and they can see the most transparent way there is what's the pricing on what's the investment going to be. Now if they go through the process, and obviously it's solar, they will need some customization. It's a longer process than just buying a car. And they end up speaking to, let's say you at this point, you can speak, you can simplify that process. You don't have to visit them or get on plenty of calls. It's much simplified because you're speaking only with homeowners who are pretty
In the
much
market.
in the market.
Yeah.
They know they don't get shocked with the big number after the presentation is done, after the site survey is done. They already know, and they're okay with that number. And obviously they will understand that, hey, if it's going to be a little bit bigger system, a little bit smaller system, the number will change a little bit, but it's not going from 20,000 to 50,000 all of a sudden, and they'll be shocked at this point. So you copy the model from Tesla, essentially implemented for in the car industry, which cost a lot of obviously headache. But this was that job, right? Everyone wanted to sell cars because you make so much money, because you make commissions and you hustle hard. So they took that part out of the equation. I am seeing this model in solar as well, more and more.
I could see that, especially for the more knowledgeable customer who doesn't need a crash course, who doesn't need the education and whatnot. I could see that. I could see that being very effective.
Yeah, so
I'm even in my mind, I'm thinking how I would market that, probably on Facebook ads with a link just straight to it. You know what I mean?
yeah, you have Facebook ads, you have traffic, organic traffic, SEO traffic, you have content. Content is great for search and optimization. And the final part, maybe not the final part, but the next part would be AI. You have ChatGPT search becomes a search engine optimization. They're about to implement shopping experience to AI, to ChatGPT and those other platforms where if they give you, let's say you're looking for some beard cream, I don't need it, but you probably do. So you need that, and you want some new products on the market. So you type it into AI, and it gives you options. What's the best for you? The AI already knows you, know who you
Right.
are, your age, everything about you, right? So it can fit the best product for you. So as of right now, it used to send you to that product page, right? Now, I mean, very soon you will be able to just click. You have your credit card attached to ChatGPT. You click right in there and buy the product. So the reason why I bring it up is the same works for high ticket products like solar. So if someone is looking for Dallas reputable solar companies or installers
Mhm.
and they want to understand the process, they do their education right in there. And then AI would tell, hey, if you are serious about it, or if you want to ask more questions about your particular situation, particular home, and how it could work, you should reach out to Brendan. Here is his email or LinkedIn or whatever, and AI would send traffic to your website. The way you would sell it is essentially just like you get people to on a call right now, but instead of on a call, you would have them on that landing page or somewhere where you can essentially have them go through the information, very transparent. They educate themselves, and you're there along the way. If they have questions, they can always reach out. But at least you're not speaking with, you're not going to the traditional way. How I remember how I was taught that you have
Yeah.
to go, you have to sit at the right side of the table. You have to make sure the wife is there. You have to make sure
Someone
that
who may not even seriously be interested,
it's
you know?
someone that's not interested. They just want to
Right.
find out about, how what's that all about because my neighbor went solar, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's that's
I like that idea. I could definitely see that being the future because nobody ever thought virtual appointments would be a thing until COVID,
yeah.
right? And then now 60% of the reps prefer virtual over being in home. Like that's how our industry shifted overnight, like overnight. It's crazy because right now you will find more reps that prefer a virtual appointment than reps that still prefer to go in home.
I don't know. I jumped off, let's say, right before that wave happened. So I couldn't imagine because I love that interaction because I was also installing. And in the beginning, I was doing everything. I was door to door sales. I was installing in the morning, learning about technology and photovoltaic processes in the
Yeah.
afternoon, right after the installation. Obviously, here we start very early because it's so hot. And then in the evening, I would go and knock the area and essentially tell homeowners, and they already knew me because they saw me with the crews, and I would just explain how solar works, and then obviously get my meetings there. So I built that relationship throughout the entire process, and even later on when I had some referrals and clients, I would always visit there during the installation time as uh, and make sure that they get extra care. And they still call me now when there's some inverter problems or what have you. So it's that relationship that I always cherished. Yeah, like you said, Zoom and virtual meetings literally took over. So I can imagine it's easier for those reps to do that online, but you still miss that, human to human interaction, which I feel like in a high ticket environment like this
Yeah.
is important.
The
But again,
conversion rate is always going to be higher face to face in home, but virtually I can run 8 or 9 appointments in a day
mm,
versus driving around where I can only do a max of maybe 4. You know what I mean?
and you save
So
on gas. You don't
yes,
stack.
on gas and it's in time. Like there was one day I did 12 virtual appointments in one day. It would have taken me a week to run 12 appointments in the field,
Yeah.
with so many no shows and whatnot. And with virtuals, they never no show. You know, it's crazy. You would think that a virtual would forget about it and no show, but they don't. It's the homeowners that no show you, the in-home appointments.
I love it. I love it. So where do you think with that, speaking of homeowners, what do you think that the change in the big beautiful bill will mean for an average homeowner and maybe business owner who also sees that line on their expenses, electrical bill that is adding up and growing and constantly increasing and becoming a burden. What do you think? How does it translate to them?
To the homeowner with the tax credit leaving,
Yes.
to be completely honest with you, I think this is a blessing. And I'm
Mm,
gonna explain why. Because as long as I've been in solar, the main complaint you will hear, or the main problem, the main breakdown is they weren't explaining the tax credit properly, right?
mm,
And they didn't get the whole tax credit back because they didn't have enough taxable liability, but that wasn't explained to them, right?
mm,
So they're in their mind when they initially get the system, they think that they're going to be locked into this lower payment the whole time. Because remember, the solar lender is expecting you to put that 30% back within 18 months to lock in that rate. But the vast majority of these people never realize the entire tax credit. So they end up paying that higher payment anyway. And then now they feel like they were scammed, right?
mm,
So I feel like the tax credit going away is going to force the hand of some of these solar lenders to where you can't put that stipulation on them anymore. They don't get a tax credit, right? They only had that stipulation in because they knew that the homeowner qualified for this 30%. So they charged this 30%, but in actuality, a lot of times the homeowner only got 18% back of the tax credit, or 21%, right? So the lender was able to get that extra percentage out of the homeowner, right? So I think it's going to force their hand to take that stipulation away. I'm hoping something forces their hand to do something about these dealer fees, because for the last year, we haven't even been using traditional solar lenders because of those ridiculous dealer fees.
So overall, I sense more transparency in the industry, and
Yes.
hopefully this will lead to a an easier education, let's say, on the homeowner side. Because if you think about it, as a homeowner who has no idea about how solar even works, you have to understand that. You have to understand the financial aspect of it, how the financing works in most cases, how the interconnection works, how all those parts that are involved in the installation, from AC switches to inverters and the solar panels, wiring, all of that, how that works, and why it doesn't mean that when you put solar on, you can get three electric vehicles and they all will be powered from it.
It's an educational process, and that's the part that most companies and sales reps are skipping. They just want to go to the sales process, right? You have to educate these people. You have to, and I always go back to the customer experience. You have to let them know every step of the process what's going on. Give them an accurate timeline of how the whole process takes. Hey, we're going to set up a site survey in the next couple of days. Explain what all that entails, how long it takes, what he needs access to, why he has to do a site survey, because this is how we, based off of his findings, this is how we get our preliminary drawing that we submit to the designers for your CAD design. When you start explaining things to them, then they're like, it makes more sense. But if you just tell them, hey, we're going to have a guy step by and get some measurements. Well, I mean, you know what I mean? You got to give them a little more than that. After that, you need to walk them through every step of the process. When we're done with the site survey, we're going to send your information to our designers. It's going to take them a couple of days to get your CAD design together. And also we'll send it to our engineers for the structural stamps, and if necessary, the electrical stamps. And they may ask you, what are those? Which are good questions. You explain all these things to them, and also let them know, hey, once we get the permit back, we're going to set up an installation date. Installation usually takes 1, maybe 2 days. In special circumstances, maybe 3 max. Let them know, hey, but that's not the end of the process. There is something called an interconnection agreement or an interconnection process. That is your electric provider transitioning your meter so that you are able to get credit for the solar that you produce. You need to be explaining all of these things. So it makes them more comfortable. It makes them feel more part of the process. And also let them know, and this is something that so many people have forgotten, and it's crucial. Once your system is installed, contact your homeowner's insurance, make them aware that you have solar and that you're adding that to the system. I can't tell you how many houses I've come across that needed a new roof, right? So they need a detach and reset, but the insurance knows nothing about this solar system on their roof. So of course, they're not going to pay for the detach and reset, you know?
Yeah.
Simple little things like this cause huge problems down the line for your customer. How are you going to get referrals when you're half explaining things and leading your customer into all kind of problems that could have been easily avoided with just a little more dialogue, a little more conversation?
I love how you explained it in simple terms, and that's That's what should be done. And I wasn't really actually remember. I didn't remember the insurance part, but that's so cool, so true, especially in your areas in Texas, big state for that
For
to be done.
hail. We're the
Yeah,
hails country. Like every February, every March and April, we're going to have multiple hailstorms. It's a given.
yeah, that's a big one here. What let me reverse that and say it again. What are the methods that you've implemented to educate your homeowners outside of the salespeople? Have you done any initiative like webinars or anything like social media wise, YouTube, Instagram,
Yes.
Twitter?
We recently started uploading, some educational videos, to YouTube, things like that, or to our Facebook page or to Instagram. Also polls to get some feedback, to get some interaction from them. We'll send out some polls asking about some of the prevalent problems that we hear homeowners having in the solar industry, and just get a little feedback. Would it have been easier if initially your sales rep had educated you on this, or would you have liked to have known this before you even started the solar process? Had you been educated a little more on the batteries, would you have incorporated and attached a battery to your system? Because a lot of sales guys before recently here in Texas were even scared to talk about batteries because of the sheer price of it, right? They almost were discouraging the customer from getting a battery, right? So
That's
things like
another energy storage. Yeah, that's whole new brain that you added to this whole system and whole skeleton and everything. Yeah, it's a beast in itself. And I remember one of the first inspections that I did on an energy storage system. The inspector showed up with a big book. He had no idea what energy storage is, and we went through every chapter. We spent like 3 hours on that inspection, going through every chapter to understand how this. I mean, he wanted to understand it on the
right,
side. I already kind of had a good idea, but I needed to convince him that this is safe and done in according to the manufacturer's standards, and we're not putting any hazard here on the homeowner. And
where
yeah,
was
it
this?
was here in Southern California, in I think the specific city was Cathedral City, which is right by Palm Springs.
We used to run into that a lot in Texas. Inspectors showing up and really not knowing anything about solar. Yeah, like you said, with a manual, that's funny.
I remembered it very vividly, but we passed, and the system was up and running. It was a well operating system, and the homeowner was happy. So that's the most important thing, and saving a lot of money, and I was protected from potential outages because that was the area that they still had very old infrastructure, utility company, underdeveloped area from that. Yeah, that's interesting. I would definitely take this approach now if I start over. I would focus on education. Social media is a great way because it's free. You have newsletters, you have webinars, you have live webinars, live streaming, and I could see the way when you were explaining the process to me, I could imagine. I somehow imagined it a short presentation that shows nothing pretty but very raw authentic pictures and from the entire process. Like this
Mhm.
is how the plants look like. You don't have to understand every. I don't understand every little detail on it, right? Because I'm not an engineer, and tell a story about it. Tell a
Right.
story how every process works, and we have to go from this place to another place, and this is what happens. It's almost like you're an architect and you're coming up to the new area of your house. It is
Mhm.
pretty much because it takes a lot of effort. You need permits, you need brain to do it, you need to
I mean, it technically
name
is a construction job.
it is a construction job, right? And it adds visually, it adds a lot or takes a lot from home. Depends on
Right.
how you see it, and it's all everyone's gusto and how they see things. But yes, it's definitely a lot, and you could essentially tell a story, the solar story, and how we do that and why we do it differently. So I think that's the path I would definitely take. Any drastic changes that you foresee taking over the next 12 months with the new changes with the changes happening in the industry?
Hopefully not anymore. I've already taken some. Like I told you, we haven't been using a traditional solar lenders like Good Leap, Mosaic. We haven't used them for about a year now.
Mm.
Because the whole purpose of a homeowner going solar, the number one goal is to save money. And the way things were going with these dealers going up to these 35, 36, 40% dealer fees, there was no way for the homeowner to save money day one. There's no way, right? So now we're having to try to sell them on the inflation that's going to come, that's going to make this cheaper than what their electric bill will be. I mean, that's a bunch of double talk, and that's not what you want in the home. You want to be able to show them savings, right? So what we did is we pivoted to a bank called Lotility, and they're not a solar lender. They actually do home refis. It's kind of like a HELOC situation, right? But it works out a lot better for the homeowner because, number one, there's no dealer fees. So we can essentially sell them a financed solar system at the cash price, right?
Very nice.
Not only that, but depending on their particulars, a lot of times their mortgage is going to come out cheaper than it already was. And that's including the solar system that we've added on, right? So this option has worked out a lot better. The only drawback is it's not a solar lender that can tell you you're approved in 15 minutes, right? It's a bank. And so they have a little bit longer of a process. An actual loan officer will reach out to the customer because they have a list of questions, and then they'll give them some options as far as interest rate and term and things like that. But it has been working a lot better. And I mean, a lot better. And it's all about how you sell it. You have to prep them. Hey, we've got a better solution for you than what most solar companies are offering. They're offering you a traditional solar lender who has an incredibly high dealer fee. And the crazy part is a lot of consumers don't know what a dealer fee is, right? And then you have to explain that to them. And then a lot of homeowners really don't understand how finance works. They don't understand that finance companies don't make any money just loaning you money and you giving them the exact amount back, right? They make money off the interest, and they make money on the dealer fees. I had a homeowner argue with me one time. Well, why is it that solar lenders only charge dealer fees? I said, every lender charges dealer fees. That's why it's cheaper to buy a car cash than it is to finance it. Well, he argued me to death because the dealerships have never articulated to him that, hey, there's a dealer fee that you're paying to use this lending option. And most people don't disclose that to people. The only reason we started disclosing it is because our dealer fees got so ridiculously high,
Yeah, no, that's true. And car industry is another great example. People don't know it. That people don't know that you can negotiate a little bit with those in the car specifically industry. But I like that approach with that bank. I believe that's how most of the installs were done in Europe, especially where I'm from Poland.
Yes.
So that was the model. Like, you either self finance, which is similar to that because you can take out a loan, traditional loan, or however you want to do it. We, as a solar company, we get paid, we install it for you in a timely manner. We make sure that we take care of the entire process. You don't have to deal with that, but it's either cash or almost like a self finance, which is similar to that bank. And it's probably just a different term. And it worked out pretty well because there's obviously transparency. You get that authority from the bank, that it's not a weird name financial institution that you've never heard of before,
Right.
and you're
Right.
gonna pay money and they charge all those fees and what have you. It's actually a bank, so we are depends, obviously how good of a relationship you have with the bank. You
Right.
get better or a little bit less advantageous rates, but it's very transparent and it's not going anywhere. It's not going to take your money and run away and hide with that. So that's a smart approach. I like that. You take that authority element from it. I mean, we didn't talk much about you, Brandon, and your story, but I'll be curious to hear that one answer from you. You have an opportunity to sit across the table from Brandon from maybe even more than 12 years ago when you were first starting your career. What advice would you have for him?
Be able to manage your emotions and your expectations in this industry. Those that can't will not last. And honestly, that's sales, period, right? To a certain extent, you got to be able to manage your expectations and your emotions. But in this industry and sales, with all the winds of change that we've experienced just in the last 7, 8 years, yes, you have to be willing to manage those emotions and expectations.
Yes, become imperturbable. My favorite word.
Yes. Yes.
Manage your emotions. The ups and downs will always be there. You have to be good with the high highs, and you have to be good with the low lows. Sometimes that's inevitable. You can't control it.
Another piece of advice I would give them is always remain loyal to the customer before the company. You know
Interesting.
what I mean? And if more people took that approach, solar wouldn't have such a bad reputation as it does right now, right? People have been loyal to the company, and even worse, their own pocketbook before the customer, right? Doing what's in their best interest as opposed to the customer's best interest. right? And again, you'll hear me talk about it over and over, but that customer experience is either going to make or break our industry, right? If enough people have terrible experiences and they keep having them, our industry will not last. But if we can turn this around, we've got a long, fruitful industry for the next 15, 20 years easily. It's all about what we do. The ball's in our court. It's about how we manage it, which is why I'm glad there's a lot of oversight finally going on around the country when it comes to solar, because that's going to weed out a lot of these bad actors, the ones that are just interested in getting paid.
Yeah, screaming from the top. I like that. I like that approach. You have to propagate it almost across social media wherever you can. So you bring you're part of the big positive change in the industry. And like you said, it's rather a low trust industry. And when you deal with that, you have to show up and
Go above and beyond. When your industry already has a bit of a black eye, you have to go above and beyond to make people understand, hey, solar's not a scam. Some people have been scammed, but solar is not a scam. That's a conversation I used to have with homeowners, and I'm not going to lie. I used to get offended, when a homeowner would tell me, well, solar's a scam. That way, it would do something to me on the inside, right? Because this is my passion. But I had to take a step back and look at it from their point of view. They're not making this up. Someone that they trust, someone that they work with, a family member has been taken advantage, right? It's real. It does happen. And what I finally had to say is, I completely understand how you feel about that. Yes, some things have happened in this industry, but that's why it's important to do your due diligence as a consumer and understand who you're doing business with.
I love it. I would obviously spend extra time with that type of customer, potential customer, to find out why does he or she think that way. And
Yes.
that's a great lessons for for the future of the company as well, because that's how you can approach it as well. But because if one person has this opinion, chances are someone else will have similar opinion, right? So
This is
you
not an anomaly, right? So, and I like how you said you would spend extra time with those people, because that's what you have to do. So many people do the opposite. They see this uncomfortable conversation and they avoid it, right? Well, not only are you not going to get that deal, but you're not going to change their opinion to have them be a voice for you, right? If you could switch somebody around and show them a good experience and make them understand why their friend or family didn't receive a good experience, then now not only do you have a potential customer, but you have a potential advertiser for you, which is even more important than the customer.
customer for life.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had referrals from people that didn't even go solar. Solar didn't work well for their situation. And sometimes I was completely honest with them and let them know, hey, I don't think this is an ideal situation for your home. But that doesn't mean it's not ideal for some of your friends and family. And they really gave me referrals because they respected my honesty. I wasn't just trying to get a deal and force something that didn't fit. Right. I don't know how many times I've seen a house with solar panels on all four sides, all four directions, just
Nice.
massive system. And you
Love
know that they didn't need that much solar, right? The sales guy just put as much up there to get his commission as fat as it could be, right?
It's
So
funny. I remember one customer actually was a mom and his adult son who was living with her, and their average bill was like between $30 and $40 average in California. It's like how did you manage it? And they almost forced us into the contract, and we had to really just explain to them, because they started taking proposal after proposal after proposal from all companies, and we just kept telling them there's really no point of you investing however amount of money into solar energy storage. Forget about that. If you're paying $30 to $40, unless the utility company has their meter backwards or something, just stay quiet and keep paying.
that's what we're lacking in our industry. What you did, maybe one out of every 30 sales reps would do that.
Yeah,
And I might be, that might be a generous estimation. And I try to train my people that way. And it makes me proud when I see one of my people do that. Turn away business because they know it wasn't in the best interest of the customer. I was doing a ride along with one of my dealers. Well, one of my dealers wanted me to ride along with one of his guys that was struggling, and he was like, he's very articulate, he's good at this, he's honest, he's like, it's just something he's missing. So I rode with him, and on the very first house, This lady wanted solar. I mean, you could tell the ones that when you get to the house, they want solar. You can tell them anything and they're going to say yes. She was one of those ladies. Well, her sister had solar and someone else in the family had it. And they had great reviews about it. They loved it. She was all about it. She was telling us what size system she thought she needed, everything. The young guy who I was shadowing, he told her, ma'am, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The only clear space you have is north face. She's like, yeah, but that's huge. He's like, you're right. It's a huge roof. The problem is the sun doesn't shine on the north ever. I could put as many panels as we want on that roof, and they are going to perform at probably 30% max. I was so impressed. Of course, we didn't get the deal. That's not what I was there for. But she gave him referrals, and he did close one of those referrals, and then he started to go on a little streak. But just being honest, that one time got him the referral that got him off of his little slump, and that's how karma works.
Most guys would sell them the reverse tilt installation.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's funny that you said that, reverse tilt. Oh my God, that was such a scam too. And then the crazy part is you can only reverse tilt the top row, because once you reverse tilt, it's throwing shade on the rest of them. But some people love to operate in that gray area, and I just can't do it. It's going to kill our industry.
I'd rather sleep at night as well. I can
Yes.
do that. Brandon, final words. Anything exciting that you're looking forward to in the near future, next 12, 24 months, despite what's happening in the industry? You said it's a blessing, so I'm expecting something else that you're excited for, looking forward to.
I think it's a blessing from the standpoint of we're not going to have irritated, aggravated people because they were promised to get a $14,000 tax credit and they end up getting 6. I'm not going to miss that at all. But another thing on the horizon that I am excited about is, wait a minute, what last year was it you and I that talked about the orphan systems? Is that the conversation we were having? You lit a fire under me. Thank you so much. I couldn't remember who that was that put that in my brain, but it was you. And there's a whole market out there for those. And I didn't realize, I guess I did realize it, but I didn't understand the scale of it until you and I had our conversation. But some of my digital marketing campaigns that I'm running right now are for people who have existing solar systems that either aren't working or they can't get their company on the phone or their company's out of business. We have created a whole lane for ourselves with these orphans. Thank you so much. I thank you so much for that.
Now I know I had to wait for 5 weeks until you give me an okay. And
I'm telling you, and my door knockers, I've been having them. Our door knockers would obviously skip the doors that had solar panels on them. Now I'm telling them, no, go back, knock those doors, ask them how they like their system. Are they saving money? Is their company treating them well? And if something is wrong, they're going to let you know in the first 2 minutes. No, my system isn't even working. I can't get anybody on the phone. This is a scam. I've been ripped off, And what happens is you get their system back up and running. Initially, they're going to be upset because they have to pay you for it when they were under the impression that they were under a warranty, right? But that's only going to sting for a little bit, because if they hadn't paid you to get their system running, they would still have a useless system up on their roof. But they're going to give you referrals. These people give you referrals quicker than the customers your new customers that you sign up for a system, because you actually bailed them out of a problem, out of a dilemma that they were having. Right. Yeah. I had one husband, maybe he was being he was exaggerating a little bit, but he said, you guys might have saved my marriage. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, my wife was dead set against solar. I went against her wishes, got the solar, and it's been up on our roof for 6 months, not working. She hasn't spoken to me in almost a month. Yeah. I mean, serious situation. So yeah, that orphan system idea that you put in my mind has been really alleviating a lot of the anxiety that I probably would have been feeling around this big, beautiful bill and the tax credit and the lenders and their ridiculous fees, because it opened up a whole new avenue. Yeah. So, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Next year, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk about direct to consumer solar sales.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you gave me something else. Absolutely. And that reminds me kind of like drop shipping, right? With the panels. Because I do that on my website. Yeah, we don't get any business doing it. But if I was doing drop shipping on my website, as well as, hey, create your own proposal, figure out how much it costs, get the ball, it would be great.
Simplify the process. And the aspect, what I love about that, the biggest aspect of it is the transparency. If you're speaking the anchoring effect bias, if you will, so it's if you go through the entire process, and I'm sure you've heard about cognitive biases, right? So if someone is going through the typical solar process that sometimes takes days and what have you to do the site survey, to know the size, to go through their bills and all of that, they're almost at the point like, hey, you know what? We've done so much work, we should continue and just get solar by now.
Yeah.
Now, this case, you're not doing that because it might be, like you said, some negative emotions with it. But instead, you're anchoring that transparency from the very beginning. They see a number, and that number is not going to be doubled or tripled, like in some cases. Because, I'm sure you've heard the stories too, where my neighbor, my cousin bought solar, they paid $20,000. Why are you charging me $40,000? They don't understand that you
Right.
have two electric vehicles, your cousin has none, and
Right.
your house is bigger than your cousin's house. That's why you pay solar, and you like 70 degrees or 65 degrees. Your cousins loves 80 degrees, and they're okay with that. So that's different.
That's where that educational process comes in,
And
and
you're gonna, yeah.
doing that. Go ahead.
Yes, and just to finish that thought, at this point, they're already anchored at the price that they can expect. They're okay with that. They feel, because unless you put out outrageous numbers there, they feel that this is fair for the amount of work that goes into it. So there's more respect for the company as well. Because after all, you're a technician. You have to be a contractor, technician, electrician. You tap into the main panel. There's a lot. There's some risk involved with that for sure. And I had customers that I had to put on how do you call the generator for 3-4 days because the solar we didn't get the inspector on time to do the main panel upgrade, and it was Thursday. On Friday, city was closed. We had to put him on, and Monday was a holiday. I think it was 4th of July or something. So we had to be on 4 or 5 days on a generator. The entire house powered from it. It was loud, uncomfortable holiday season. So it was a mess. So sometimes you have to deal with those situations. But yeah, I think overall it can bring some transparency to the whole systems, whole process. And like you said, if you focus on a customer and their benefit, their experience, this is a good way to approach it.
Transparency is key. Transparency throughout the whole process. That's where all these companies are dropping the ball. Honestly, like it's funny how you brought up the anchor price. That's something that I train on because what people usually do in the solar industry is they'll throw out a price, but then when it's time to sign the paperwork, the price is higher, right? Whereas I train my guys, throw out an anchor price that you know is higher than what your proposal price is. Get buy-in on that anchor price, right? Because the anchor price is still going to be greater than their $120,000 electric bill over the next 25 years, right? When you get buy-in on 45,000 and then show them a price of 38,000,
There.
now they really, right? And yeah, it's all about referrals. It's all about the customer experience. And the one thing people need to remember is if you want these people to expose their friends and family to you, then you must treat these people like family themselves, right? Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. And with that, Brendan, I want to say thank you so much for your time to spending this afternoon with me. And if you look at the clock, it's almost an hour, and when it feels like 5 minutes, when an hour feels like 5 minutes, you know you had a good conversation.
And I was like, 58 minutes. There's no way we've been on the.
Right? It was a great conversation. It's always great to catch up. And any final words from you?
We have a great future as long as we take care of it ourselves. We have to nurture our industry and kind of nurse it back to health after a lot of the shenanigans that have gone on. But again, it's the customer experience. It's all about transparency and the customer experience. If you keep those things in the forefront, you'll be fine in this industry.
Thank you so much, Brendan.
No, thank you.